The Real Buccaneers. American Dollar Princesses of the Gilded Age. Thank you to Forio for sponsoring this video. The series The Buccaneers, about 5 feisty American heiresses husband hunting amongst the castle-rich but cash-poor English nobility, is based on Edith Wharton's novel of the same name, which in turn is based on the author's real youth amongst the American dollar princesses of the Gilded Age. She based the characters Conchita, Mabel, Nan, Lizzy, and Jinny on women she knew. The daughters of American robber barons, they were rejected by New York's old money high society, so they boldly set out across the Atlantic, intent on bagging British Dukes and Earls. Then they sailed home to rub Mrs. Astor's nose in their booty of coronets, bought with cold, hard American cash. Let's meet 5 real women from history who inspired the Buccaneers, and author Edith Wharton, who knew them all. Plus, we'll find out where this series lands in the timeline of other popular romantic historical dramas, and how it's connected to Bridgerton and the Gilded Age. Jinny Jerome was born in 1854 in Brooklyn, New York. Her father had grown up on a farm, but made a fortune in finance. He was among many men who pocketed obscene amounts during the industrial boom that followed the Civil War. They flocked to the cultural center of New York City. They constructed the finest mansions and filled them with art. Mark Twain dubbed it the Gilded Age. Unlike a true golden era, the 1870s to 1890s saw only a thin veneer of gold, concealing corruption, excess, and exploitation. The robber barons gave their children every advantage. Their daughters were raised to be ideal wives and society leaders. They were tutored in etiquette and taught to converse in multiple languages. Jinny learned piano from a renowned composer. She grew into a talented and striking beauty. Her mother had high hopes for her marrying up in society. However, the one thing nouveau riche families couldn't afford was acceptance. The old money of New York, led by Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, were horrified by the upstarts flooding their city. Mrs. Astor could comfortably accommodate only 400 in her ballroom, so she decreed that only 400 people in New York were worth knowing. The rest were riffraff. Jenny's mother was furious about being iced out by the gatekeepers. So in 1870, she loaded her 3 teenage daughters, Jinny, Clara, and Leonie, into a ship bound for London. There, 16-year-old Jinny met the 29-year-old Prince of Wales. They shared a passionate affair, but by the time she was 19, the lust had simmered into a friendship, which would last the rest of their lives. Her intelligence and humor even made her a close confidant of the prince's wife, Alexandra. Edward introduced her to his friend, Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill, second son of the Duke of Marlborough. He was not in line for a title, but Jinny liked him well enough, and the union gave her a legitimate place in the prince's inner circle, the Marlborough House set. Jinny and Randolph became engaged 3 days after meeting, but their nuptials were delayed for several months, while their parents hashed out the prenup. The noble Spencer Churchills were aghast at their son marrying an American. But when the Jeromes offered a dowry of $250,000, several million today, they changed their tune. The couple wed at the British Embassy in Paris in 1874. Jinny returned triumphantly to New York. The aristocrat on her arm opened doors to many old money ballrooms. Jinny Jerome became the first dollar princess. Other young ladies and their mamas took note. Jinny gave birth to a son, Winston Churchill, just 7 months after the wedding. She claimed a fall had caused her to go into premature labor, but Minnie noticed how healthy and large the baby was. Winston adored his mother from afar. As was customary, he was left in the care of nannies and boarding schools. He was followed 6 years later by a brother John. While both boys bore a striking resemblance to their father, Jinny and Randolph began to live separate lives. She slept with King Milan I of Serbia, German Prince Karl Kinski and Herbert von Bismarck. She loved to travel and cruise around the world. She supposedly asked a sailor to tattoo an Ouroboros on her wrist, which she concealed with a bracelet. Jinny remained friendly with her husband and helped his political career, but once he was diagnosed with syphilis, they stopped sleeping together. He suffered for 20 years from the disease and the debilitating effects of mercury. Their cover story was that he had a brain tumor. Randolph died at 45. The 41-year-old widow married George Cornwallis West, a 21-year-old captain who was the same age as her son. She chartered a hospital ship, the RAF Maine, to care for soldiers during the Boer Wars in South Africa, and was awarded the Royal Red Cross. Jinny was one of 3 former mistresses of Edward VII, invited to sit in the royal box at his coronation. Jinny wrote plays, many of which were staged in London and starred Mrs. Patrick Campbell. The actress had an affair with her husband George, ending their marriage. Jinny made important social introductions and advised her son Winston as he launched what would become a legendary political career. She married a man even younger than him, Montague Phippen Porch. In 1921, while coming down the stairs in a new pair of high heels, Jinny slipped and broke her ankle. Gangrene set in and her leg was amputated. She hemorrhaged and died at the age of 67. The Buccaneers wanted to look their best when tidal hunting across the pond. So they employed skincare products with ingredients like rosewater, glycerin, and cucumber, but also toxins like lead, mercury, arsenic, and ammonia. Fortunately, today we have much better and safer skincare products to give you that glow aristocrats just can't resist. Like the FAQ 202 by Forio. It's the new generation of LED face mask. You simply apply the FAQ primer to a clean, dry face. Then secure the mask with the headband. Select programmed treatments from the app. The LED mask uses 8 different light wavelengths to tackle signs of aging and other skin concerns. It's ultra lightweight and wireless, so you can enjoy your treatments while relaxing or doing chores. Regular use re-strengthens layers of the skin and boosts its natural healing process, leaving your face smoother, softer, and with fewer fine lines and wrinkles. For a complexion even a dollar princess would envy. To celebrate their birthday, Forio is offering my viewers 35% off the FAQ 202 face mask and almost all of their other products, including already discounted items. Just click the link below and use my code 35TEATIME. And now, back to history. Consuelo Enzinga was born in 1853. Her father hailed from an old family of Spanish aristocrats who owned sugar plantations in Cuba. Her mother came from a plantation-owning family in Louisiana. Consuelo grew up in the South and in the family's mansions in New York and Newport. Her next-door neighbor was Alva Smith, who we'll meet later. The girls became bosom buddies. In her teens, Consuelo and her sisters, Emily and Natika, were noted for their beauty, poise, and confidence. They went with a fashionable set of debutantes who inspired the Buccaneers. At a party at her father's country house in New Jersey, Consuelo met rakish fortune hunter George Montague. His father, the Duke of Manchester, along with many other British aristocrats, had come on hard times. They still had their titles, historic estates, and air of superiority. But as the right to tax the peasants had been revoked in 1660 following the English Civil War, they were running low on cash. George and Consuelo married at Grace Church in Manhattan. The guest carriages caused a traffic jam on Broadway. The groom's father openly wondered if his heir had married a, quote, red Indian. The newlyweds split their time between his family estate, Kimbold Castle in Ireland, and London, where they were part of the Marlborough House set along with Jinny. Consuelo caused quite a stir with her uninhibited nature and fondness for playing banjo. She wasn't readily accepted, so she decided to infuse some fresh American blood into the cadaver of English society. She invited several of her friends to London to bag their own titled Brits. Enter the Buccaneers. Consuelo was the inspiration for Conchita, the first Buccaneer to marry. Soon the London season was flooded with American heiresses on the hunt for cash-strapped noblemen. Millions of dowry dollars crossed the pond to renovate ancient English mansions and bolster the ailing peerage, while American parents got to brag that they had a countess or a duchess in the family. There was even a magazine, the Titled American, in which British nobles could advertise their eligibility to rich American ladies. But marriages based on exchanging cash for coronets weren't always happy. Consuelo and George had a son and twin daughters, but they never grew to love each other. George drank and spent his wife's money with abandon. In 1890, he inherited his father's dukedom and filed for bankruptcy. He died 2 years later at 39, leaving Consuelo broke. Her daughters, Jacqueline and Alice, died at just 16 and 21 from tuberculosis. In 1901, Consuelo's brother died and left her $2 million. The Dowager Duchess was able to spend the rest of her life in style. She commissioned a Cartier tiara set with 1,400 diamonds. She died of neuritis in 1909 at the age of 56. Her son William, the 9th Duke of Manchester, propped up the family fortune by marrying American heiress Helena Zimmerman. But reckless spending continued to diminish the family fortune. Kimbold Castle was sold in 1951 by the 10th Duke. The 12th Duke did hard time for fraud. When he died in 2002, his son gave Consuelo's tiara to the Victoria and Albert Museum in lieu of tax. The 13th Duke, who lives in the U.S., has done hard time for grand theft auto and passing bad checks in Vegas. Alva Smith was born in 1853 in her family's mansion in Mobile, Alabama. Her father made a fortune as a merchant and married the daughter of a U.S. congressman. Alva was one of 7 children. When she was 6, the family relocated to New York City and summered in Newport. That's when she met her lifelong friend, Consuelo Enzinga. Alva attended a prestigious boarding school in Paris, where she learned French and refinement. After her New York debut, she was invited to a party hosted by railroad tycoon William Henry Vanderbilt's daughter. She attended with her bestie, Consuelo, who introduced her to William Kissam Vanderbilt. The couple were married in 1875. He was a fellow American and thus did not have a title. But as the son of the richest man in America, he was okay. William took over the family business and inherited $55 million, $2 billion today. He and Alva had a daughter and 2 sons. Alva was further connected to her best friend when her sister Jinny married Consuelo's brother, Fernando. Alva may not have been a duchess, but she was determined to bring the Vanderbilt family the social status she felt they deserved. And she had unlimited means with which to buy acceptance from Mrs. Astor. Alva built a spectacular chateau on Fifth Avenue, which occupied an entire city block between 57th and 58th Streets. She planned a dazzling housewarming costume ball in 1883. The party was the talk of town, not least because Consuelo would be traveling from London and bringing as her +1 none other than the Prince of Wales. All the old money ladies who had once snubbed Alva were clamoring for invitations, but she neglected to send one to Mrs. Astor. Caroline's popular daughter, Carrie, begged her mother to acquiesce, and, unable to deny her child, Mrs. Astor got off her high horse and paid a call on Mrs. Vanderbilt. Triumphant, Alva attended her soiree dressed as a Venetian noblewoman. Alva next found her climb to the top blocked by way of the New York Academy of Music. It refused to sell boxes to members of the nouveau riche, and Alva wasn't about to sit in the orchestra with the riffraff. So she took her money uptown and was a founder of the Metropolitan Opera. It was built with 3 tiers of private boxes to accommodate more of New York's newly moneyed. Alva asked her husband to build her the world's largest private yacht, the Alva, then a summer cottage in Newport. The 50-room mansion, Marble House, outshone Mrs. Astor's Beechwood estate next door. But mansions and yachts couldn't buy happiness. William was unfaithful, though some whispered that he'd hired a woman to pretend to be his mistress so he could get out of his miserable marriage. Alva shocked society by filing for divorce. She got a settlement of $10 million plus several estates, and William got to run away to Paris. Alva had never given up on her ambition to marry into nobility, but at 42 she had no interest in another loveless marriage, so she forced her 18-year-old daughter down the aisle instead. Consuelo Vanderbilt, named after her mother's best friend, was in tears under her veil as she married Charles Spencer Churchill, Duke of Marlborough. He was the nephew of Jinny's husband Randolph. Both bride and groom were in love with other people, but Alva threatened to kill her daughter's boyfriend and herself to get Consuelo to the church on time. Charles took his bride back to England and used her inheritance to renovate Blenheim Palace. They were miserable together and both had affairs. Their younger son, Ivar, bore a striking resemblance to Consuelo's old boyfriend. The marriage was annulled after 26 years, and Alva came around to testify that she had forced her daughter into the marriage. Alva herself chose to marry again for love, to her ex-husband's best friend, Oliver Hazard Belmont, a member of the Rothschild banking family. The couple had 12 happy years together before he died. Widowed 55-year-old Alva became a suffragette. She donated a great deal of her fortune to the cause and paid the bail of picketers. She was elected president of the National Women's Party. In 1920, the movement was successful, and the 19th Amendment granted American women the right to vote. Alva spent her final years in France, near her daughter Consuelo, who was now happily married to a French pilot. She purchased and restored 16th century Château d'Augerville. Alva suffered a stroke and died in 1933 at the age of 80. Her coffin was flown back to New York and carried by female pallbearers. She was buried next to Oliver in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. Mary Minnie Fisk Stevens was born in 1853 to a hotelier. Her mother, Marietta, the daughter of a grocer, had done her own social climbing by marrying a millionaire 25 years her senior. She had high hopes for her own only surviving child, Minnie. At 19, she was stunning and vivacious, with dark hair and green eyes. Her mother whisked her away to London to find a titled groom. To stir up interest, Marietta greatly exaggerated the size of Minnie's inheritance. Taking the bait, the press dubbed the young debutante the Great Heiress. Soon her mother was turning down proposals. When a French duke made an offer, Marietta accepted. But she was forced to come clean about the actual size of Minnie's dowry, and the duke retracted his offer. Minnie managed to convince her embarrassed mother to reconsider a previous suitor, one she'd actually liked, Sir Arthur Paget. He was the grandson of the Marquis of Anglesey, but was not in line for a title of his own. Still, the couple wed in the summer of 1878. The bride wore a sapphire and diamond bracelet gifted to her by the Prince and Princess of Wales. But Marietta went back to New York, disappointed. The prenuptial agreement furnished the newlyweds with $20,000 a year, about $600,000 today. They set up housekeeping in fashionable Belgrave Square and threw lavish parties. Londoners were thrilled by her dazzling jewelry and American cocktails. At the 1897 Devonshire Ball, Minnie wore a jewel-encrusted Cleopatra costume worth $200,000 today. Minnie's home was a center for other dollar princesses, and she arranged many transatlantic unions. She was hailed as one of the shining lights of English society and one of the most successful and intellectual American women to ever live in London. When England got dull, she and Arthur joined Bertie and Alexandra on their yacht on the French Riviera. The royal couple stood as godparents for the eldest of the 4 Paget children. But Minnie's social position was hindered by the fact that she didn't have a title. That all changed in 1906, when Edward VII, now king, promoted his old friend Arthur to Knight Commander of the Royal Victorian Order. Thus Minnie was now Lady Paget. Her late mother would have been thrilled. Arthur's military career often kept him away, expanding the British Empire. Minnie occupied her time organizing bazaars and balls to raise money for charities. Her Mask of Peace and War at the Haymarket Theatre brought in $7,000 for soldiers of the Boer Wars. She helped Jinny Jerome organize the hospital ship, the RAF Maine. She did not forget her American roots and collected English furniture from the 1600s to send back to the States for the Jamestown Exposition in 1907. During World War I, Minnie went to Serbia with the American Red Cross and worked tirelessly as a nurse. She was actually honored by the enemy Austro-Hungarian government. Minnie was devastated when her eldest son, Lieutenant Colonel Albert Paget, was killed in action by poisonous gas. In his memory, she raised £1 million to provide homes for blinded soldiers. Just after the war, the influenza pandemic ravaged Europe. Minnie was among its victims. She died at 66 and was buried in London. Maria de la Natividad, Natika Enzinga, was born in 1859, 6 years after her sister. When she was 22, Consuelo introduced her to Sir John Lister Key, 3rd Baronet. The couple wed in 1881. Natika had only bagged a baronet, the lowest rank of nobility, which is actually not part of the peerage. But as most baronet families had purchased their titles in the 1700s, they were often much wealthier than the older peerage. John was close friends with the Prince of Wales. The newlyweds took up residence in his ancestral home, Denby Grange, a 1,000-acre estate in Yorkshire. They had one son, John, who died in infancy. Natika often attended court with her husband and became a close friend of Queen Alexandra. She was always dear to her sister, Consuelo, and was by her bedside when she died in 1909. Sir and Lady Lister Key remained prominent after George V became king. Natika joined Queen Mary's relief efforts during World War I. Sir John died in 1924, age 71. Now widowed, Natika took a trip home to America. She was invited to the White House by President Calvin Coolidge and had tea with Grace Coolidge. During World War II, the elder society stateswoman decided to flee the bombings in London and return to New York City. She moved into the Ambassador Hotel on Park Avenue. She died there in 1943, age 86, and was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. Edith Jones was born in New York City in 1862. Her paternal family had made a fortune in New York real estate, and the term keeping up with the Joneses is said to refer to them. They had the best of both worlds. Well connected to old money society, Caroline Astor was her father's first cousin, but also flush with cash. Little Edith grew up with the best of everything. She wintered in the city and summered in Newport. She traveled Europe with her family and became fluent in French, German, and Italian. She was shy and bookish. She read through her father's library, then borrowed books from his friends. Her favorite pastime was making up stories. Edith was nearly a decade younger than Jinny, Consuelo, Alva, and Minnie, but watched with fascination as their romantic dramas played out. Edith was likewise expected to spend her youth tailoring herself towards catching an impressive groom. Then, after reaching the pinnacle, marriage, spend the rest of her existence in the one-size-fits-all vocation of a wife, mother, and hostess. She found these expectations superficial and oppressive. Her escape was writing. She published her first poem at 15, but her parents refused to see her name in print, in case it damaged her marriage prospects, so her poems and short stories were published under male pseudonyms. The Joneses decided to debut Edith to society a year early, before she got any more intellectual. The 17-year-old's debutante season was a disaster. Her brother's friends asked her to dance, but she cowered next to her mother. Nevertheless, she attracted the attention of a suitor, Minnie Stevens' brother, Henry. Though the Joneses thought the Stevens were below them, they accepted their daughter's only prospect, and the couple got engaged. But a few months later, the tables turned, and Henry's mother encouraged him to break it off. The Times reported the broken betrothal was due to a, quote, preponderance of intellectuality on the part of the intended bride. Henry died a few years later at 26. Decades later, Edith got her cold revenge against her almost mother-in-law by immortalizing her as the crass, social-climbing Mrs. Struthers in The Age of Innocence. Edith did not receive another proposal until she was 23. She leapt at the chance to escape spinsterhood. She wed Edward Teddy Wharton. They shared a love of travel and dogs, but were otherwise mismatched. He was kind and enjoyed sports, but had little interest in mental pursuits. Their honeymoon was a floundering affair, and they may never have actually consummated their marriage. Still, they lived in an amiable companionship. He raced horses and motor cars while she redecorated their mansion and hosted parties. Edith found her life dull and unfulfilling. Her only joy was writing. After a decade of conformity, she published again. While visiting London, she went into a bookshop, and the clerk, not recognizing her, advised her to purchase the new book that everyone had been talking about, The Greater Inclination by Edith Wharton. Now in her 40s, she was a successful author. Her novel, The House of Mirth, was serialized in Scribner's magazine in 1905. The clear-eyed, sharp-tongued tale of a young woman struggling to find a husband and fit in to contemporary upper-class New York had all of America wrapped. The massive hit was a boon to Edith's career and her bank account. For the rest of her life, she wrote voraciously. In bed every morning before dressing and starting her day, she penned at least one book every year, totaling 15 novels, 85 short stories, and books on design and travel. She returned often to the themes of being trapped in society. In her books, happy marriages are few and far between. This reflected her own life. After 20 years of marriage, she and Teddy's amiability was wearing thin. He suffered from debilitating depression. They moved to Paris for a change of scenery, and Edith threw herself into the avant-garde crowd. She took a lover, the first of her life. Morton Fullerton was an Adonis. The pair shared passionate nights together, which she gushed about in unpublished erotic poems. But in public, he ghosted her and went with other people, leaving her confused and frustrated. Meanwhile, Teddy's mental illness deepened. He was often angry and difficult. He had affairs and embezzled $50,000 from her estate. Edith mirrored her marital turmoil in the novel Ethan Frome, in which she gender swaps she and Teddy. After 28 years of marriage, she reluctantly filed for divorce. When World War I broke out, she stayed in Paris. She aided refugees and orphans, opened sanitariums, toured the front, and turned her writing skills towards urging America to enter the conflict. She was awarded the Legion of Honor, the highest civilian honor in France, which made her a chevalier or lady. After taking the war off from her usual writing, she returned with her greatest novel yet, The Age of Innocence. It returned to the time of her youth and a quaint New York, untouched by war. A young man is torn between the innocent girl his family expects him to marry and the older, worldly woman he is drawn to. The book helped Edith resolve her own choice to go against society's expectations, and it struck a chord with an audience in the midst of massive post-war social change. The Age of Innocence won the 1921 Pulitzer Prize in fiction. Edith was the first woman to win the prestigious award and was catapulted into the stratosphere of great American writers. In 1837, she was living at a country estate in France and working on a novel, The Buccaneers, another jaunt back into the dizzying social seasons of her youth, when she suffered a heart attack and collapsed. 2 months later, she died in her bed, surrounded by friends. She was 75 and was laid to rest in Paris. Her final novel was 3/5 complete and published as is in 1938. In 1993, Marion Mainwaring used Edith's notes to finish The Buccaneers. It was adapted into a miniseries in 1995. The 2023 series puts a modern spin on the age-old conundrum of young women torn between being themselves and conforming to society's expectations, something Edith Wharton and the other dollar princesses would surely relate to. So, where does The Buccaneers fit into the timeline of other popular historic dramas? While the modern twist on 19th century romance is very much in the model of the smash hit Bridgerton, the two stories were set 60 years apart. Bridgerton in the 1810s, aka the Regency era, while The Buccaneers is in the 1870s, the mid-Victorian era. If the characters who were in their 20s in Bridgerton were still around to see the Buccaneers come to London, they would be in their 80s and gossiping about their great-grandsons falling in love with them. The Buccaneers is closest historically to the Gilded Age, which is set just a decade later in the 1880s. In fact, you could look at it as a prequel, as many of the characters are based on the same people from real history. Alva Vanderbilt, in particular, was an inspiration for the Buccaneers in her youth, and is almost exactly recreated as the fictional Bertha Russell in the Gilded Age. Her daughter Gladys also mirrors Consuelo Vanderbilt. If you'd like to learn more about how your favorite historical drama fits into the timeline of real history, let me know in the comments, and I might make a video all about it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other history videos. You can also join my Patreon to support my work and get early access to all of my multi-part series. Thank you for watching.